Good morning.
Brother Ian. Good morning. Good afternoon to you. Good morning to me. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very well.
Great.
So today you brought up a topic, taking on the emotional baggage of others, why we do that and how it impacts us.
Yeah.
Something me and you to have postdoctorates in.
Right. Absolutely.
So out of curiosity, what was it that prompted you to bring this topic on?
Well, I think it was a great segue from the previous talk we had, which was, I have to look it up because my memory, the healing our ancestral lineage and
ancestral lineage,
and that stuff. So,
good one.
It was great, and ironically enough, once we chose the topic, the week was filled with clients with that kind of topic. And
funny how that
ironically,
works.
yes, exactly. And ironically enough, which is not ironic, it's just a fact, most of them are health practitioners, nurses, neuropsychiatrists, psychotherapists, and whatnot. So I think that is very interesting and very helpful for those of our listeners who actually work in this kind of field. Understanding that piece as well can be very, very precious, because some of the people I work with have decades of experience. They're close to retirement, and yet, that part is still a bit in shadow.
Codependence unite.
Correct.
Those of us who had early childhood trauma, we really were taught, or we learned ourselves, or we're also taught with external stimuli coming in that we had to be on. I mean, I know for me as a clinician, so much of my clinical perception really started at a young age. And I'm talking 4 or 5 years old, being attuned to my parents' emotions for survival. Right? It's the base of it, I would say, is that. And, trauma does two things, or does many things, but two things that do happen to the individual experiencing it. One of it is that it makes you externally referent. So your compass goes outside. Not how am I feeling, like how's my mom feeling? And then from that, choosing what the next step is. And the other one is that it makes you mobilized. And mobilized meaning you're always in that stress response, because it's never safe enough, perceived or in real time, to be relaxed, to be in a parasympathetic. So those two things really inform this. Like one is, again, externally referent. What are you feeling? What's on our face?
What's going on outside?
What's going on? Yeah. And the other is that makes us really anxious. So it really puts us in this hypermobilized state all the time. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's another thing I see when people, so we're always looking for cues of the other person so we can start there.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest elements that you just brought up is how... I think one of the greatest tools that we have that I was taught at the beginning of my training was the 50-50 tool. 50% on yourself, the attention, the presence, the contact, and 50% with the patient. And I think it's very, very important that, be it in session or be it in our relationships, what percentage is focused on the outside?
That's great.
How much more attention am I paying to the other rather than myself?
Yeah. So I find part of the narcissistic one from people is that 0 outside, 100% inside, right? And that's not healthy. And then the codependent thing is 100% outside, 0 inside. And we're looking, in your words, for that really sweet middle spot. And that's a lot of training. And it's so interesting, again, you say about healers. I mean, as healers, yes, we've fine-honed that awareness externally, which can be useful, but we have to really take it maybe even more than 50% inside, both in the clinical room as well as our personal life. So we become empaths. We become forced empaths. Now, if you are a Pisces like me, it's going to go to the extreme, because already you have this very fine-honed sort of psychic, for lack of a better word, abilities that just comes with that archetype. But then it really goes off the reservation with being hyper aware. I always joke, I can feel a mouse fart in the other room. Like always was this energy. So I love this thing that you're saying of pulling it back towards self. The 50-50 rule that's wonderful, actually.
Yeah.
To pull that back.
Yeah. And
one thing, go ahead.
Yeah. And what's funny is that you mentioned, the narcissist and the codependent. And the truth is that, the narcissist is so insecure.
Yeah, 100%.
That it's always
100%.
Outside anyway. Yeah. It looks like
100%.
It's 100% on the...
Well said. Well said. Yeah. So that's a great point. So what I mean by that, I just mean it's not out there like the codependent, in that the codependent has the narcissist is suffering. To me, it's the same thing. It's two sides of the same thing, right? They're really poor coping mechanisms, because the narcissist suffers and everybody around him suffers, and the codependent suffers and everybody around him suffers. It's not, there's no true relationship.
Right.
I had this realization a couple of decades ago working, because similar to you, I work with a lot of codependency. Seems to be something that, again, comes up over and over. I had this awareness that the way it works, right? So we are in these unsafe environments at a very young age. We start learning to pick up other people's stuff. Mm-hmm. Many times it's actually shoved on us, because if the narcissistic or wounded parent has no self-awareness, they can actually goad us into taking on their stuff, even at ages where we're not equipped. I'm talking 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So we start picking up stuff. If we pick up stuff, then we start interpreting it as it's our responsibility.
Right.
Some weird thing happens in a psyche. So I'm picking it up. Now it's my responsibility.
Right.
Then there's the big fuck up, which is now, if it's my responsibility, I got to fix it / take it on.
Right.
Right. It's like the fixing thing. And part of this thing too, also for me as my journey as a healer, I realized like I was trying to fix people initially as opposed to allow them to heal.
Yeah.
And that's also a big one. We don't need to get into that right now, but that fixing thing is a very addictive behavior and a trauma wound that we feel that. But again, this piece of, I feel it, I pick it up. Mm-hmm. Because I pick it up, I interpret it as like, well, it's my responsibility unconsciously. And then we get wrapped into always doing this people-pleasing thing. But it's deeper than that. It's trying to fix, it's trying to get people to have some kind of peace. Except that the other party has no interest in that. They're just interested in the loop.
Right.
It's not even that we can help them heal it. You can only heal yourself. So what do you say to that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it relates to many times we have, or we had, sick parents or parents that weren't well in some kind of way, where their discomfort made it so that they didn't pay enough attention to us. And that really sticks with us, because it's like, I have to fix mom. I have to make mom feel better, because then she will be able to take care of me. Then there will be space for me. And as you said, we become highly sensitive. We have to, because it's a matter of survival. And then it becomes, the pattern. It's our life purpose. I am the altruistic one. I am the empath. I am that kind of person. It becomes our persona, our identity. And if we're not fixing people, then we have that sense of void, of emptiness.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's so hard. I always remind everyone, and I remind myself, it's so hard as these adults who have volition, who come in their power, to really appreciate what it felt like as a 2, 3, or 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Where you're actual survival dependent on these people who are really not equipped to do that. So like when we say this as an adult, I always invite people to take a second and just feel the abject terror that little boy or girl felt. The abject, like, you will die if that person's not going to take care of you.
Right.
You're fed by them, you're clothed by them, you're sheltered by them. It's a very survival root chakra thing. And it's not fear, it's terror.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And then, of course, it becomes something that the culture gives kudos to, because if you're a caretaker, codependent, hey, it works for everyone.
Precisely.
Not for you. And also not for them, of course, because it's a very unhealthy relationship. But externally, boy, you end up losing a lot of your vital energy, your vital force, leading to definitely mental dis-ease as well as physical not well-being.
Right. And as a matter of fact, all these health practitioners come into my space and they say, I'm depleted, I'm exhausted. And, and they tend to focus on the fact, I have this this particular client who is depleting me, who is, and you start working with that because it's, until they make the connection between the fact that it's actually you taking on or giving away, and it's not the patient in particular, then it really opens up that perspective.
I mean, so awesome that they're coming to someone like you with your big toolbox of knowledge to actually heal. So they're obviously closer to healing than other ones. It's the most common thing I would say as someone who's done this work for decades and taught for a long time, 2.5 decades. It's amazing how that piece, where I would just see these students in my first class would always be like, you're here because you need to work on your codependence. If you don't do that, you're going to get sick. It was like the common thing. It was very rare. It was usually the people who were doing a second career in their 40s or 50s that had done enough internal work. The younger healers would always come in with that thing.
Right.
And I love that thing, right? We put our agency outside. This patient is doing this to me.
Right.
You're like, brother, sister, like it's you. Like it's not, it doesn't matter. They're coming there for a healing. You're there to actually hold the boundaries. Right? The biggest thing with sort of those types of people that drain us is actually our responsibility, not only to ourselves, but also to them by not allowing that to happen.
Right.
It's what the Buddhists call idiot compassion. Again, that's another good one, right? Idiot compassion is they come in, you're drained, they leave feeling great. And again, for the wounded part of us, there's a part of us that feels negative pleasure from that. I'm drained, they're great, right? It's the same pattern of childhood being repeated over and over. And it's serious business, right? This stuff will drain your vital essence. It will lead to illness. The mental part of it is just the initial, but physically it really takes a toll.
And
then we also get hustled. So the first part is we taking it on, but when you have that energetic hole in you, the hustle is real. So now you're in a bad neighborhood with a nice golden watch and you're kind of cruising around. Someone's going to rob your ass. Like you got to like learn how to protect yourself because the hustle is also a part of it. Like there's a part where we do it, right? What do you need? What can I do for you? There's that part.
Right.
And we all know it, right? It's staying on a phone for an hour every week with the same person over the same topic, complaining about their boyfriend, complaining about their girlfriend, complaining about their asshole boss. It's the same thing over and over. That's a good pattern. The hustle is real. So if we get off and they come complain to an E and, oh, this patient, I can't believe it. That's that loop, that's the hustle happening.
Right.
So I would say those are the two things we have to also, as we dig into this, to pay attention to. Where are we taking it on and where are we unconsciously open to the hustle?
Right. And the word boundaries you mentioned is absolutely key. Boundaries in, are you punctual? Do you always add a half an hour to your session time? Do you give them space after hours? Do you talk to them on the phone? Do you WhatsApp them? And so on and so forth. Boundaries is so much. Yeah,
so this really applies to healers, but it applies to everyone. So one of the things that I always, same thing when I used to teach, I was like, you need to really stick because it's actually like raising a child or raising an animal. It's not healthy for them when you give them boundaries. So our stuff really affects them. So the person, if you're not punctual, if you're going over, especially with someone like that, they feel more safe, regardless of how they try to hustle you. So part of our job is to be like, here's the hour, here's the 45 minutes. And it's not cruelty. It's actually just the same way you raise an animal. You don't let them go get run over by a car. The boundary is for their safety. So part of this codependence thing or the idiot compassion thing, it actually doesn't work out for any party involved.
Absolutely.
But certainly that's such a thing, right? It's such a powerful thing.
And even the element of resentment, which after a while, you as a therapist start feeling resentful because they're not getting better. Holy fuck, I gave you a bunch of extra half hours or hours and you're still not getting better. Where's my reward for all the energy and work I'm putting in?
That's amazing. So I love what you're saying, right? And that's such a common thing. So all this stuff is being externally referent.
Right.
As opposed to holding the center. Our job is to really hold that center, and the people that can drink from that can drink from it, and the people that can't, you're planting a seed. But having this externally referent idea of what success is, what people are, like that's the part. It really reminds me of what Carl Jung used to say. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid meeting their own souls. And there's this piece in that as well, where both for the patient as well as the practitioner, that's also a part of it. It's amazing how absurd these behaviors can get before we actually go like, wait a minute, if I get to know my own soul, if I actually feed my own soul, everything is all right with the world.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't mean that everything is like, milk and honey, but certainly when you have resentment in any situation, there is the big sign, not that you miss something. You missed the exit by about 10 kilometers. You didn't just miss it. So by the time the resentment comes up, you got to go back.
Right.
Can we talk about a second how difficult it is to break this pattern in existing relationships?
Yeah.
So if you've known someone, or if it's your family, it's your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your lover, your uncle, first of all, that part of being aware what's yours, what's theirs. And that part of actually backpedaling from the way things have been, that can be quite an arduous process. Do you agree?
It's enormous. It's huge because it's who we are, who we think we are, actually.
Who we think we are.
I am the caretaker. I am the compassionate person. And it's not about being compassionate or not. It's that taking on their burden. Because the moment we even consider the possibility not to take on their burden, we feel we're not helping. We're so enmeshed with that thing that we lose our sense of self. So it's really tough because it really takes baby steps to slowly start seeing this, start disidentifying with this, I am part. And then, finding yourself in absolute empty space. And it's like, who the fuck am I? Who am I?
Right.
And tolerating the anxiety of not knowing who you are if I'm not the helper, the caretaker. So it's absolutely huge. And obviously, all these health professionals do it at home as well with their families. It's not like it stays at the office. Obviously, they're doing it in every part of their life.
Yes. I mean, if you're a healer, pretty much, I've never met a healer, honestly speaking, who didn't struggle with this at some point. Right? Yeah. We get called to that. And again, on a soul level, that's part of the journey. But also really important is when you start wrestling with this, it's incredible how much more exacting the healing becomes. How much more perfect actually the healing becomes. Because this really taints everything. And when we take on the emotional baggage of people, we're swimming in a toxic sludge.
Yeah.
And that also affects the other person.
Right.
It's not just one way, it's both ways.
Right.
So that's a real thing.
It is. It is. It's huge. There's a distinction that I always find myself making in sessions with these professionals, and is the difference between responsibility and duty.
That's a good one. So break that down. How would you differentiate?
So duty is that part that whose other side of the coin is guilt. Duty is fear-driven. It's my duty to do this. I have to do this because if I don't, then, there's that anxiety behind it. I have to do it because it's my duty. It's fear-driven. Because if I don't do it, I'm going to feel guilty because I was taught, and it comes from a higher place, whether it's religious, it's spiritual. I have to do this. I have to do this. It's my duty, or the military, or, you name it. But responsibility is really love-driven, is understanding where the boundary is of your contribution to a relationship, be it personal or professional, and knowing that that's what you want to do. There is no negative consequence if you don't. I mean, there is, but you don't feel the fear of that. You know where you stand. You want to do that because you love being that part in that relationship, and you do it.
That's a wonderful distinction.
Yeah.
Wonderful distinction.
Most of these professionals that, they come to me, they have the sense of duty because there's this voice in the back of their head, the inner critic that says, if you don't do that, then, fill in the blank because then you're a bad person. Then you are not a good individual.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to the survival mechanism of the child. So definitely as an adult, that's the voice. But again, people have to really appreciate that when you're doing this is actually because you're getting on an unconscious level the signal that you're going to die. It's that deep.
Yeah.
It's that deep. So as an exercise, it would be really good. It's something that I do myself. And, with a new relationship or old relationship, I always check how I feel. If I feel agitated after a phone call or a Zoom call or a conversation, checking how I feel.
Yeah.
Part of this is also people have to practice being vulnerable. Obviously, you don't go to the biggest psychopath relationship you have. That probably wouldn't be a good place to start.
Right.
But places where you can you're talking to someone for half an hour and it's like, hey, you haven't asked me how I am. Or, hey, we haven't. Obviously, you don't do that with a patient. But I'm saying if in a personal relationship, because part of what's connected with this is hiding. It's not pleasant, but we hide by not sharing anything, by being fully in this, taking the baggage on. If we take up a little bit of room in a relationship, there'll be less room for taking the baggage on an unconscious level. And that's really about sharing about ourselves, how we're feeling, not just a smile on the face and, let the person go. And I would add to this, there's a level of narcissism that's really gone to the next level the last 10 years, let's say, with the real advent and use of social media, where the people who had this wounding of not the level we're talking about, but being on the opposite side, they're gone off the reservation. So there's a level of just people come and spew and they're just going there in their heads. So again, we have to take up some room. Like one of the ways of not taking a baggage on, and again, we can get into next what the consequences are, is taking up some space. Being aware when we're talking, wow, we just talked. How much did I talk? How much did you talk?
Yeah.
How much did this person talk, right?
Right.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, it comes back to the 50-50 thing.
That's great.
Are you asking yourself, how am I feeling as you talk or you listen to the patient? Or to your spouse or to your partner or whomever? Am I feeling something? And sometimes after the phone call, you realize, how did I feel? I was not in contact with myself. So that really helps as well. If you realize you were completely 100% out of your body, look back. What made me uncomfortable? What did I feel I had to do? What was the reason? And obviously a non-judgmental, compassionate approach is key. Because if you are afraid of your own judgment, you will not go back and listen to what happened and see what happened and feel what happened.
Very true.
You're going to run away from it.
Yeah. We have to be here, but one of the things with the trauma, obviously, is that we don't want to be here. So one of the side effects of the trauma is we're always abdicating the body. We go into the head and out of the head, right? We're actually almost floating above our body. And the problem with that is obviously a survival mechanism. But the problem with that is that we can really tolerate a whole lot of pain before we become aware.
Yeah.
We'll snap at something or traffic or be curt, but it takes a lot. So that's one of the things I always say, be embodied. If you do a couple of minutes of Tai Chi a day or sit, or just when you pet your cat or dog, feel. So it's great what you're saying. The feeling part is one of the ways that we actually start dropping into the physical structure of the body, which we abdicated at a very young age, and become aware of what we're feeling.
Yeah.
It's amazing how most of us actually don't know how we're feeling unless it gets too extreme.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I always say this in practice, I'm like, how are you? Hi, I'm great.
Right.
And then I ask a second or third time with some people and they're like, oh God, I had a rough week. Or like, just really having a hard time in my partnership. Right. I'm really having a rough time with my work. It's the immediate response is I'm fine. And that's a trauma response, actually. It's one of the ways that we disconnect it.
Right.
And also because a lot of people just want to get over that and then start barfing on you, whatever it is that they're barfing. And it's not that they're sick. That's a habitual thing. Again, the idiot compassion part is what I'm talking about here. The loving thing is just 50-50. I love that. That's a great marker. That's a great tool to use.
Yeah. And it's unbelievable how our comfort zones can be so painful. We give it for granted that the comfort zone is a good place, but many times when we're checked out, the comfort zone is a really uncomfortable place.
Yeah.
So I would say in the beginning of the work, doubt your comfort zone. Take a minute and just check in. Doubt doesn't mean you have to discard it. It just means ask yourself, is my comfort zone a really comfortable, peaceful place, or is my comfort zone?
It's a drug, right? Yeah. So a lot of in the beginning, anyway, of the path, the comfort zone is a drug. I mean, I remember working these 4 or 5 long days in clinics, and I would spend a whole Saturday or Sunday on the phone with people who were really ill, and it felt great. It felt lovely, and then I didn't know I had dark circles around my eyes and couldn't sleep, and really wasn't well. It's the comfort zone, and it feels good, right? It's a high because. Part of as a child, if your response to trauma is taking on the emotional baggage, is absorbing it, it feels good. It's fake love. It's saccharine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like a sugar that'll kill you. It's not sugar. It's a sweetness that's actually very toxic.
It's where it's where it becomes a sense of purpose.
Yes.
And that's what fucks you up.
Even worse. Yeah, it goes to the next level, even worse than yes.
So you make it your purpose in life. So I have to get a job as health practitioner, and then
and the side gig
and the side gig and the phone calls when I walk back home.
Exactly, all the time. And again, when you disconnect from yourself, it's so painful that you got to do more of the same drug to not feel the pain of the disconnection.
Right.
There's that piece too, right? It's just so like it's already disconnected at work, because already you have no boundaries. And it's amazing. It's not even healers. I see this in the business world or something where people aren't doing their job, but they're sitting there. Half of their job is listening to everyone around them say what a horrible life to have. It's like you can do this in any way. You don't have to be a healer. And then part of this emotional thing is absorbing the energies without even the talking. So the talking stuff is a little bit easier to see. The other part is just like, well, why do I feel off? I mean, there's certain people that you hang around with and you walk away and you're like, oh,
you're exhausted.
Just wiped out.
Right.
And again, the amazing thing, it's like buying people drugs. It's not helpful. You're not giving them a glass of juice. You're not giving them a fresh salad. You're just feeding their neurotic impulse. So that actually is not helpful.
Yeah.
That's really hard for codependent people to appreciate. It's just not themselves that they're damaging. It's actually very damaging to the other party. And again, you don't need to sit there and educate everyone or give them a therapy session. It's a matter of just be conscious. The boundary thing is really huge. I continue your words.
Yeah.
To draw those very firm boundaries when things feel off
in
your body. Again, we go back to the body. The body thing is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And moreover, continuing with this, it's like even as... And obviously, we're not talking only professionals, because so many people have it with their mom. They talk 3 times a day with their mom, or their dad, or whatever, the sister in Australia. But the point is that even as health professionals, we don't realize that pain and suffering are essential parts of the personal and spiritual growth process. We can't deny this. We can't take it away from people. It's not our job to take their suffering away, or even our intention doesn't necessarily have to be, I want you to be better. That's also a forcing current of some kind. And I know it feels cruel. What? As a health practitioner saying, I don't want you to feel better. Why would that be? But it's really more subtle than that. Is the intention, is the pushing. I don't want to push you into health. I want to be here with you and help you understand where you are and how you can be better or get better or, pass to the other side in a better way.
Yeah, it's people's choice, right? So to me, it's always a differentiation between curing and healing.
Exactly.
A lot of these things trying to cure the situation, which is the fix-it situation. And again, it's like there are times when someone's in distress, they need heroic medicine, by all means, it's not that. But the rest of it, which is 95% of the time, is actually the healing. And that's responsibility of the self to the self.
Right.
I love what you brought up, by the way. That's such an interesting thing. I deal with that all the time, where adults are talking 3, 4, 5 times to a parent or to a sibling, and they want to throw themselves off a roof, but it's something that they feel very obligated. So obligation is another key word in this conversation.
Yeah.
Where the hustle comes through obligation.
Which is duty, basically.
Which is duty, exactly. I love that. I love that word. So it's that. So we feel it's our duty, but again, we were entrained with that, right? I'm Italian, or I'm Iranian, or this is what our cultures do.
Right,
It's, the Jewish
right.
culture. This is how we roll. It's like,
Right.
yes, but that entrainment is an old school thing in that lineage
Right.
of to hustle your ass for your energy.
Exactly. It's really a cultural, generational
Yes.
thing.
It's a survival tool. It doesn't really work, but it's a survival tool passed on. It's like, don't you dare stray too far.
Right.
This is how it's worked. And this is sort of what we also talk about, me and you, a lot. It's about living. It's not about survival.
Yeah.
Part of this
It
conversation
was
we're having.
about survival. It was
about
when we were
survival.
children, but now it's not
Yes.
anymore. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean it even as a bigger level, absolutely correct to your point. And I mean even as a bigger level, there's a part where most people are surviving, regardless of income, regardless of social status, regardless of whether they're single or together. They're in survival mode because of these unexamined wounds,
Yeah.
because these wounds have not been examined. So part of doing this is an invitation to actually go into living. And living, again, it feels precarious in the initial stages because you're not going by the formulaic route. That's saccharine. That's going to poison you in the end.
Right.
It's a little bit, you got to kind of feel your way. Like, whoa, I've never been here before. What does this feel like?
Right. Right. And tolerate the terror. And
Tolerate the terror.
And beyond, I mean, something that's also extremely important, what you mentioned was so fundamental for me in working, especially with this aspect of the inner child and inner adult, the loving parent, is the fact that it might feel like you're betraying your family stepping out of that pattern. That's
a big one.
huge resistance.
That's a big one.
It feels like you're being disloyal to them if you don't carry this heritage with you throughout your whole life. And so that too requires an element of grieving. You are
That's a big one.
breaking a
That's a big one.
pattern. You are interrupting a tradition that might have been passed on for generation and generation.
It definitely was. So again, I love it. Duty, obligation, and then feeling responsible to say all these in the same basket. It is definitely going to feel like that.
Right.
And it's always, I was going to say almost always, it's always in my experience when I sit with it that is passed on many, many generations.
Yeah.
So it's a really big thing. We learn it. It's very deep learned behavior.
Yeah.
So part of this, again, I love the language that you use, is to have that internal parent, to parent yourself the way you were parented. If you had a child that is you, and you're the parent, having had the knowledge that you weren't parented necessarily the way that was healthy, what would you say to that child that's not an adult? Would you take that phone call? Would you take the same phone call 5 times a day? Would you take the same phone call for 45 minutes?
Right.
These things don't have to be black and white. Can you slowly wean yourself off the saccharine of pseudo love, right? And this is the part that's also so painful. We're such beggars for love.
Yeah.
We're such beggars. It's so painful.
Yeah.
We're these royal beings that act like we're these low-level beggars begging for love. And it really comes from loving self.
Yeah.
So a good parameter to run this through is like, is this loving towards myself? Look at the first phone call, the second, the third, the fifth. And what am I getting out of it besides the negative aspects? Because that's actually not clean. It's not healthy for the body.
Yeah.
And, why am I tap dancing for my dinner? There's always a middleman in these behaviors. We go through the middleman, which is the false self, the fake self, to get something that we can't consume, we can't digest. So when you examine it, it's quite wild.
Yeah.
When you actually examine what happens here.
Yeah.
And it has consequences, right? It has dire consequences. I mean, it beats on your body, it beats on your psyche, it beats on your immune system.
It does.
Real stuff.
It is.
Real
And what
stuff.
always fascinates me is the fact that going back to the inner loving adult and inner child, it's that many times when I start this kind of work with patients, they're like, well, it feels like the right thing to do. And so my question is always extremely simple. So what would you advise consider someone you love dearly is in this same scenario. What would you tell them? What advice would you give them? And it's always, be it a daughter, be it a partner.
That's great.
We are always we're capable of that kind of compassion and wisdom, truly. But when it comes to ourselves, we lose that because we fall into our child ego and we start thinking that we have to first beg, and then we feel it's an improvement when we have to earn other people's love. We don't realize we haven't, it's not that much of a step out of the beggar position. So we know what it's like to be loving and wise and compassionate to our loved ones. It's just about, introverting this perspective to ourselves and learning to give ourselves these precious and wise advice. Because once we see it, if we see it in others, it's really easy to point it out. It's like, whoops, no, that's a big no-no, that's unhealthy, or you name it.
Everything we've been talking about these last sessions really is be your own lover. Start with being your own lover. Be your own mother, be your own father, be your own best friend. Not as a way of going out to some dark hole like a Unabomber and hiding, but actually start from that place of not being a beggar, but being a king or queen from an energetic perspective. To really treat ourselves that way. To coronate yourself from the beggar to royalty. And in a kind way, we're talking energetically, not as arrogance. But certainly to really shift that power balance and cut out the middleman, love yourself first. And from that, you'd be surprised. Because relationships will change. Yes, some will have to be released. New people come in. But this position for those of us, it really is giving up a drug. Because this kind of behavior affects your neurochemistry for real.
Yeah.
And it's an adjustment.
Sure. And, when you get to the emotional burnout, then, that's the moment you might realize it's time to start that work. Right. Hopefully.
So I would say let's, as an exercise for everyone, it'd be really powerful. Everyone, probably when we're having this conversation, for most people, someone's going to pop up. Whether it's a family member or friend, a partner, a way that we're actually not self-caring, right? Like to just examine that and just take the things that we talked about and apply it. Even if you don't want to do anything. How do I feel when the phone rings? How do I feel when the email comes?
Right.
How do I feel when I go for that cup of coffee? How do I feel when I leave?
Right.
What kind of lies am I making to avoid it? Again, how am I complaining to somebody else? This is another one for me. Whenever friends come to me and start bitching about someone, one time I'll listen, but the second time I'm like, whoa. We already had this discussion. Right. This doesn't need to happen to me. You're using me as a drug to numb yourself to go right back into that relationship. So that conversation needs to be had with that intimate other, right? So that part of like when we have these things come up, to examine them.
Yeah.
And again, small bites. You don't have to swallow this in one gulp. Small bites.
Correct.
First and foremost, look at the map. What is the emotional body telling you?
Yeah.
What is it telling you? What are you feeling? From there, move forward.
Right. Take a moment before you pick up the phone to answer the call. Take a moment before you read the email after you see it's gotten there. How does that feel?
Yes.
How does that feel? How does that feel?
Yes.
And
the places. Go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
To me, it's always take small steps. How would it feel if I didn't, pick up the phone? How would it feel?
I was just going to say that. It's beautiful.
Right.
Because it's not overwhelming otherwise. Just starting with being honest with yourself with how you feel. It's amazing how much that shifts.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. And then that's fine. Just start with that. The next time, I don't want to do this. Then the next time I'll be like, just today I'm going to do. I make a white lie. Just cut out the white lie. I'm really tired right now.
Right.
We're having the same discussion over and over. We talked last time. We were together a whole day. We hadn't seen each other for weeks. You didn't ask me once how I was. I just want to say that. Right. These little ways are really powerful.
Right.
So
there's a beautiful saying that Barbara Brennan always had, which is consider the possibility. You don't have to do it yet. Start with considering the possibility of not picking up the phone. How would that feel? Consider the possibility of saying no to that request or yada, yada, yada. Just start with that, because your body will automatically go there. You will feel it in your body if you merely consider the possibility and take it from there. Take it as awareness.
That's really great. Yeah, it's about learning to tolerate, and small bites helps you learn to tolerate it.
Correct.
But on the soul's journey, anywhere where we betray ourselves, there's a price to be paid.
Yeah.
And that price is very high, way more than people realize. It's just a phone call. It's just an email. It's just a dinner. But it really builds up.
Yeah.
And, there's an energetic, thing that happens here too. Is that when you do it over and over, it actually puts the doormat on your back, where even people that you meet for the first time, it comes up as like, this is a person I can do this with. So people have to be aware of that too. It's not just the exhaustion and all those things which are horrendous and your immune system and your psyche, but it also opens the door to being that guy, being that woman, that like everybody can come do this. So it's this sort of really negative feedback loop where people just feel permission to come there and just leave their baggage, leave their garbage.
We get someone in the first few seconds. I mean, we get what that person's about in the first few seconds. We're all intuitive. We're all sensitive to this. So if you have a doormat saying welcome and you're so open, everybody's who needs that is gonna step right in.
It's amazing when I was starting my practice, becoming a healer, there were like these couple of docs I would run into. One guy was an internist. I mean, he was harsh, but holy shit, he would just freaking fillet people if they stepped out of line. I remember looking at that, being like, well, I'll never be able to do that, but there's something this guy's doing. And I would see how people would get into line, and actually then the healing would go way better. So also pay attention. If you come across people, not necessarily that they're that harsh, but are good at self-care, use them as teachers. I mean, for years, I would see people who were very good at it, like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not interested. No. And it would really shut the whole thing down. I would always look at these people, be like, what are they doing? Now, I knew I could never do it on that level, and I'm not a harsh person, so I couldn't use that specific way of being, but I would learn from people who knew how to have boundaries. That's how I learned to have boundaries. Because I really, as a child, in the level of craziness I was raised in, there was zero boundaries. So part of that too, I would say to people, like, we all have people around us who have good boundaries and learn from them. Now, I'm not saying if they're angry or if they're harsh, like that's for a lot of people, that doesn't work for me certainly. But certainly learn from the people who actually have boundaries in their lives. And they're not narcissists. These are people who are actually the 50-50 thing you're talking about. They kind of had a certain level of parenting where they have enough sense of self where they're not going to be a doormat.
Right.
So, this podcast could be called the Doormat Podcast. I mean, it's really the ways that we were taught to, and then continued feeling like we need to be doormats. And like, no.
Yeah.
Kindness, which is really weakness, masked as kindness, is actually not kind to self or the other person. Because also it has to remember, karma is a real thing, being that when we set up a situation where someone's being abusive and we go along with it, we're putting them in a karmic debt. That also is a real thing. Like, that's not a kind thing to do. This is something like kind of was revealed to me, I don't know, a decade and a half ago. I was like, whoa, it's not just, I got to really stay on top of this stuff because I'm actually putting also this on them.
Wow.
And being co-creator of karmic debt for them, right? So there's a whole energetic, psychic, emotional part of this that's even beyond the visible. So, end of the day, it's everything we talked about. The boundaries, pay attention. How are you feeling? From that place, you go forward.
Right. Challenge the idea, the belief that if you're not caretaking, you're not helping, or you're actually hurting.
Yeah, and something that really stuck with me a couple of podcasts ago you talked about, and I really loved it. You were talking about the adult ego, which I love that language. This stuff happens from when we as adults are in a child ego. So part of this thing also is like when we go into the adult ego, this actually already the boundary fortifies. So I would also say people start paying attention to that thing inside themselves and their behaviors. Is it a child ego part of me?
Right.
Or the adult ego? The adult ego is way better at self-care than a child ego, which is
way better.
Totally just running around asking for love from people who actually can't give them love.
Right. Either can't or won't.
Or won't. And the withholding thing is real because that's also a coping mechanism. God knows we'll had our share of friends and lovers who've done that, like it's so that's a very thing. The withholding thing too, if you're codependent, holy shit, is that crack to a crackhead. Because if someone's withholding, then you really go overboard doing the tap dance and the 7-course dinner and. Right? Is that those kinds of vampiric narcissists. Sweet Jesus, do they know how to trigger that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great dance. We're both really good at, I'll fuel that thing for you and you'll fuel that thing for me. It's a dance. Yeah. It works so well.
And we both lose.
Yeah.
Both parties lose. That's the thing. Even it looks like the other party that's like doing the taking wins, man, it's losers. Because everyone's starving, right? My experience as a clinician is people are starving. So starvation comes on both sides of that little table.
Yeah, it's always the idea of the love, the idea of what it could be. Right. That's why it's never nourishing, because it's always in the realm of idea.
Yeah, and is there for a reason. So I've sat with that for a long time. When you don't have it as a child, so you live an idea, and the idea is like fumes. You're so starving that the fumes, the odor of the cooking is enough, says that wounded ego. Yeah. So we can never live with it. When you're in a motorcycle and you're running out of gas, you kind of shake the bike side to side as you're hoping to get to the next gas station. It's that kind of energy. It takes so much energy as you whip the bike left and right to get that last couple of ounces of fuel into the carbs. It's that kind of energy. It's like, whoa, just fuel up, man. Doesn't need to be like that all the time.
You're just running on fumes.
You're just living on fumes. And it's exactly how it is. It's literally running on fumes. Yeah. So part of that too is learn to tolerate the full meal, the full gas tank. Yeah. That takes work too, right? It's like the fume thing. The mobilization is a part of the fume thing. Yeah. If I'm always shaking the bike side to side and tap dancing and doing this, then if you get used to that, having a full tank is like, whoa, what do I do with this?
Yeah, it slows you down. It's so exciting not knowing if you're going to starve or not. It's really challenging. But
people never appreciate, as much as they bitch and kvetch about it, they really don't appreciate what a high it is to be constantly in survival mode. Right? But I can't meet it. I can't believe it. Another loser guy, another loser woman. I can't believe my friends are at. It's like, but what is the negative pleasure here? What are we getting out of it?
That's finest. Absolutely.
Yeah, that is finest. Yeah. That's that 7-course Michelin star meal.
A 7 Michelin star restaurant.
It is. Of fumes.
Of fumes, exactly. Well, they're actually going there. Some of them.
Well, I was going to say, like with the foam and all that in Spain. Yeah. Exactly. So like that whole thing is like, well, we've eaten so much that it's just like, well, we were starving. We haven't even eaten to experience that, right?
Correct. Yeah. But we paid it $500, so it must have been awesome.
Yes. Yeah, and except for us, it's 500,000. Right. Psychic and emotional dollars. Yeah. We're in debt, like the U.S. economy, $1 trillion every 100 days. Oh, that's going to work out great. Nah, that's not going to work out. So it's that energy, right? It's that same level. Yeah. So I feel people have a good idea. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think we've exhausted every. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, everything I wanted to say about it.
Good. Yeah. So again, I know these things can be real heavy sometimes. Our intent is really to just do this so you can have more joy and peace in your life. That's our intent. Yeah. Even though we're like the Blues Brothers and every time we're like, now this little corner of the dark room. But our intent is to bring light to it so you can see and not bang your head and stub your toe. That's the intent here.
Because there's a lot of there's a lot of fake love going on. Do this, I'll do that. Correct. And that's, we're all, we're all love and whatnot, We're saying and doing this because there is a juicier, there is a more substantial, more nourishing form of love that we can access. So, it's throwing down the curtain so that you can see what's really behind that.
Lovely. And if that doesn't work for you, we're going to have our $500 T-shirts and bumper stickers soon at Ian and Abdi's. We're going to get that going.
Ahoy.
So just man, put the magnet on if you don't want to listen to this. It'll all work out.
Slow down and soften up.
You're going to get a green card, brother. True American. Very good. Well, we send you lots of love till next time.
Likewise, my brother. Yes. Always lovely to talk.
Always lovely. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Take good care.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, bello. Ciao, ciao.